and it kills the cell. It's no longer very functional. It's a waste of energy. Another cell comes along and kills it. And the problem with that is that when it does that, it releases a lot of toxic ingredients like peroxidases and things that damage other cells. So there's got to be a way to sweeten that up. It builds up, you're going to have lots of damage and you won't live very long. So detoxification, defense, which is immune system, cellular communication. You know, almost all tissues around the body communicate with each other. And the really exciting one is the gut, which we'll talk about in a second, where, you know, it's got lightning fast communication to the brain. Something happens here, I know it right now. Or lightning fast to the liver and then to the brain, and with reactions. And that's cellular communication. And then cellular transport. How do you get the nutrition from the gut to the individual cell? And then what happens to it in the individual cell? And then energy. Well, what happens to it is you produce energy. How do you produce energy? What's going to interfere with it? What happens if you get it interfered with? Do you know anybody that's just tired all the time, has no energy left, and is not functional pretty much? That's what's happening to them a lot of time for various reasons. And then finally, structure. Structure is extremely important function. If you look what happened in the gut, again, it affects a lot of how your bones are. Your bones replace themselves every so often. You have a continuous, unless you're taking the drugs we do to prevent osteoporosis or problems and fractures with it. In this case, the remodeling doesn't happen very well. But your bones are constantly being eaten away and replaced. And that makes elastic bones, bones that aren't brittle. And if these structural problems build up and you get brittle bones, and you have osteoporosis and your vertebrae collapse, you have back problems all the time, and maybe you break a hip. And that's from structural problems. So we'll talk about that too. But not today. Today we're just going to talk about digestion and the gastrointestinal tract. So what's involved in the digestion? Well, basically what we're doing with foods is we're taking in protein, fats, and carbohydrates. Both simple carbohydrates, processed carbohydrates, and complex carbohydrates. If you look what happens in the mouth, when you chew stuff in the mouth, you release saliva. Saliva has amylase in it, and it breaks down starch. It breaks down starch from joining together glucose or whatever into individual sugars. And actually, if you chew like a cracker long enough, it starts tasting sweet. I never leave it in there long enough, but I've been told that happens. And so then the food goes on down to the stomach. And what's in the stomach? Well, the stomach is lined with globular cells that release acid, unless you're taking a lot of omeprazole or Prilosec. And I'm going to take a little time here to talk about that. But releases that, and that will actually help break up proteins into the individual or small groups of amino acids. And you can't absorb protein. If you absorb a protein in your body from food, it actually gets in your blood system, you get a immune response, which won't be pretty. So we break it down into individual amino acids, or I think groups of 3 it can handle, but not clumps. And so what happens when we take something like omeprazole? I don't like omeprazole. Omeprazole is great for symptomatic relief, and it's short term, 6 weeks. That's what it came out originally. Now we got it over the counter, we have people taking it without any physicians looking after it. I think it's terrible because it's not a safe drug. The warnings that come out now that if you take, well, they don't want you taking it over, if you're taking it daily, over 5 years without going off for 2 years. And the reason is because it reduces the acidity in the stomach. You're not absorbing your iron, your B12, some of your B complex, It affects calcium and magnesium absorption some too. These are all very important for making bones. And it's not right away, but over a period of time, past 5 years, then you can have what's called a catastrophic fracture of the femur. It doesn't break in one place, it shatters. And then you have no problems. Yes?
Is that a prescription medicine, or is that, are you
It's over the
talking
counter
about?
now.
Are you
Omeprazole
talking
is-
about Pepsid AC and?
No, Pepsid AC is a H2 blocker. It's safer. It doesn't reduce the acid nearly as much. Those H2 blockers really reduce it. And some people are on twice a day, and it just gives you the willies. But anyway, that's the way it is. But if you're on it, think about going, if you've been on it for 5 years, think about trying something else for a while, for a couple of years anyway, before you go back on it. It's great for symptomatic relief, but there's always things to pay. You have to pay the piper on these things. And so, anyway, it's a particular, when it first came out, I jumped all over the detail people when they came in, because they knew this was going to be a problem. But anyway. Okay, so we're at the stomach, we break down the proteases into amino acids, and then we go to the duodenum. This is where the bile comes in. And the fats that you eat, you can't absorb fat by itself, it has to be emulsified. You do globules of fat so that you can absorb it, and then it can be processed in the body. So bile is released, and it's like dish soap. You know how if you can have a really scudsy looking plate with all sorts of fat on it and stuff, you want to get that off? Well, you put it in the dishwater, and then with soap in it, and you scrub it, and it just cleans up right away. It's emulsifying that fat. It's making them so the fat is soluble, and it can be taken away. Same thing with fat in the body. When you emulsify it, then it makes little tiny globules. It's called chylomicrons, but you don't know that. Anyway, you absorb it then through that, and then your body can use it for food and fuel. Okay, so now you're getting through the duodenum, which is the first part of the intestinal system. It's just after that much after the stomach. And now you got all this gunk. This is called chyme, C-H-Y-M-E. And this goes to the small and large intestine. Now it starts hitting the intestinal flora, the bacteria and the fungus. Now we have 3 general types of bacteria that are in there. I mean, you guys have billions or trillions of these little critters in your gut. And when you have feces, it makes up the bulk of what's in the feces. It's bacteria. And that's how much you have in there. We have symbiotic bacteria. And these are very important because they make things like vitamin K. And without them, of course, you don't do a lot of things like clotting blood and things like that. So vitamin K is very important. But the bacteria make several vitamins, or they change provitamins into vitamins that you can absorb. They also are very important in handling cholesterol. Your cholesterol comes into the gastrointestinal tract, it's handled by the bacteria, and it's reabsorbed later on. Unless you have Zadia or something like that to prevent it. Then you have another product, or another bacteria that are called commensula, I think it's called. And these are yes and no bacteria. These are ones that sometimes help you and sometimes take. They're give and take. It's kind of a neutral. But they do help because they form mass in the feces and the gut. And then you have the last one, which is a parasitic bacteria. And these ones normally are kept in check by all the other microflora and the other bacteria in that. They all keep each other under control until you take an antibiotic. And if you take an antibiotic and it gets down into the gut area and is not absorbed out, then it can knock out some of those good bacteria and allow the parasitic bacteria to multiply and take off. And this is where Clostridium difficile, C. diff, comes in. Very deadly, very bad, has to be treated. People have died from it. They don't perforate the gut and that. And they harm us by producing toxins. And the toxins can also damage the intestinal wall.
I have a question.
Yeah.
In the, you see now advertised all these probiotics,
Yes,
and that's over the counter,
yes.
and they're pushing that.
I
Is
push
that-
it too.
Is that
It's wonderful. Yes.
considered?
Yeah, no, it's very important. And I'll get to that a little bit long up there.
Okay.
But be sure it's refrigerated, be sure it has enough in it. You need at least 3 billion of the bacteria. It needs to be combinations of lactobacillus, acidophilus, and bifidobacter, many different strains of bifidobacter.
Okay.
But you can tell the good ones are refrigerated.
Is refrigerated?
Capsules,
Capsules.
refrigerated?
So it's like that Activia yogurt?
Activia is okay, but it doesn't have enough.
Oh,
If you like to really eat yogurt, yeah.
That's what I was wondering, they tell you to eat yogurt, but that's not enough, right?
Well, I gotta say, I have not looked at the concentration in Activia. But remember, you need both bifidobacter and lactobacillus, acidophilus, lactobacillus acidophilus.
would those be ingredients that if they are in that Activia, that it would be listed as those
Should be,
ingredients?
certainly, I would think so.
Okay,
If it just says, probiotic, whatever, that doesn't mean enough. Because you need a minimum of, I think it's 2 billion to be effective, and they really want more.
Are those numbers in the book?
I'm sorry?
Are those numbers and those words you're saying, are they in that book?
Of course.
Okay.
could you hold that book up to the camera, please? Let me zoom in on it, so people can see
I
it.
wonder if Jeffrey will, the author will be watching.
Thank you.
If you're watching, I'm sorry, Jeffrey, I didn't do a good job. Yes, young man.
What are the three main ones you said that need to be there? Lactobacillus?
Oh, two, but not just two. There's lactobacillus acidophilus, that's one part. The others are many species of bifidobacter, and there's a ton of different bifidobacters. And you want lots of those, and you want the lactobacillus acidophilus too.
Would you recommend taking those in a capsule or trying to get it in your food?
You can't hardly get in the food. You can, if you have a problem, I recommend taking a capsule. If you don't particularly have any problems with your evacuation or your, any gut problems, you probably don't need it. I mean, as long as you're getting enough fiber in your diet, and we'll get that in a second. I'm under pressure. Oh, good, he's coming right away. Okay, so now preferred foods of the bacteria are very important too. The good bacteria like fiber, and they take certain types of fiber and they make them into something called fructans, which is good bacteria food. If you go on further down into the gut, into the large intestine, they prefer inulin, which you'll find in onions, garlic, Jerusalem artichoke, leeks. That's what I can remember anyway. And those are ones that are very good for your diet, and you should be thinking about it if you aren't. And if everybody eats garlic, nobody will know you ate it. Now, what happens if you don't eat enough fiber? What can happen is if you just basically are eating no fiber in your diet, very little veggies, and I know people like that, it just drives me nuts. Those good bacteria that require that fiber die. And if they die, you can end up with an imbalance. You can have those nasty parasitic, the C. diff and friends, getting the upper hand again and causing all sorts of problems in your gut and sickness. So eat fiber, eat veggies, lots of veggies, your spinach and your, all the stuff they say, broccoli. We're going to get into that later for the immune system. It's incredible what eating the right vegetables can do for your immune system. But you got to come back to that. Okay, now so what else interferes with nutrient absorption? I mentioned like the Prilosec, but there's other things too. Any disruption of the absorption can be a problem. And if you look at the gastrointestinal tract, different nutrients are absorbed in specific sites in the gut. And if you do anything that interferes with that absorption, then you can end up with lots of problems, nutritional problems, and eventually even malnutrition, which shows up as other things. Now, one of the things that used to be a lot more popular than now was antacids. And some people just pop Tums or Maalox or whatever all the time. And this is bad because it interferes with the absorption of iron and B12. And the problem is you end up with an anemia from it because you're no longer getting enough into your blood to be able to produce more of this. So what happens now, you got to get rid of all this. You've absorbed this, it goes to the cells, and they process it into energy in that. But you got waste materials after that. How do we get rid of it? Well, through the gastrointestinal tract, through feces. You know, it goes out that way. It goes bile and feces. And then we have the urinary tract. You know, we pee out an awful lot of waste materials that we produce, like urea, etc. But then, how about the lungs? What do you suppose the lungs get rid of? Carbon dioxide, water vapor. Now I want to talk about the relationship between the gastrointestinal tract. It's linked intimately to the immune system and the nervous system. Messages from the gastrointestinal tract can reach, like I said before, can reach all tissues of the body. And they do this by either direct innervation. The nerves that innervate the guts are the very same type that are in your brain, and they have a direct connection to it. And that's why I said earlier that it's almost instantaneous. That's one way that they communicate, but they also communicate by messengers, and that's the genetic expression, which is again affected by diet, lifestyle change, and environment. By production of those genes of messengers, cellular messengers, to go to a different place, or to carry food to different cells, because all cells have to get fed, or they die. So, the food that's absorbed, or the materials that are absorbed across the gut wall, are by two different methods. One's by active transport, and one's by passive transport. Active transport actually has climbs aboard with, let's just say it's like a boat, and you sail through it, and then it's taken off on the other side. The other one just drifts through, and that's the inactive transport. But a lot of it's actively transported, and it's fine as long as you don't lose the ability to power that for that transport, because some types of poisons or toxins will do that. Other sites of the immune system, now let me go back. If you look at the gut is surrounded by the lymph system. The lymph system is an inlet part of the immune system. You actually have over half of your whole immune system lining the gut. And this is to prevent, they're actually what they call gatekeepers that prevent bad things from getting into your system that will cause toxic reactions like toxins from bacteria, or things like gluten. We haven't talked about gluten yet. Gluten sets up an immune reaction in the gut. And the gut recognizes it as this gatekeeper, recognizes it as, this is bad, get away from me. And it sets up messengers like crazy to go to the liver and then to the brain to produce inflammatory messengers, which then in turn cause white blood cells to migrate up to the brain. And in this case, when it gets to the blood-brain barrier, which normally stops anything from getting into the brain, it has a way of stimulating inflammatory cells in the brain to cause brain inflammation. If you do it enough, you end up with dementia or Alzheimer's.
So gluten.
Yeah,
That's gluten.
let's
But that's
recap
just
that.
one thing. That's the one everybody thinks about, that's why I used it. And that's,
So we really aren't, we should really be avoiding gluten if you don't, even if you don't have celiac.
I don't know that. There's quite a bit, if you talk about grain is another book
Yeah,
I
we read
read.
that book too.
Yeah, that's another one you want to read. It's really interesting because it has to do with gluten. And he approaches it two ways, that there's celiac disease, but there's also a kind of a lesser sensitivity to it, which is a gluten sensitivity. And he links it to an awful lot of illnesses and problems in childhood on up. And it's a very interesting book. I do recommend it.
So you buy that?
I bought it. I got it at home.
No, you buy
You
the whole gluten
believe it.
concept.
But it's
You
not to
believe
buy.
Well, because it's just a fad, it's the latest fad.
Well, yeah, and I know that you've made jokes about it, blaming everything on gluten. I think there's a good possibility that gluten can be at the basis of a lot of it. There's another book, Against the Grain, that I read years ago. A friend gave it to me. And it's about what happens when people settled in communities, like 8,000 years ago, whatever, where they started, instead of being hunters and nomads, settled in one place and started eating grains. The average height in Israel, the place that they've dug, went from 6 foot down to 5'5" within a generation when they came in one place.
So, how about paleo?
What's that?
Should we all be on the paleo diet?
Oh, I don't know. I read that one too, but boy, that's a long time ago.
I don't think you're gonna get to finish.
The paleo diet, of course, has got an awful lot of red meat in it. But I don't know. It's the red meat it ate is like wild meat. And one of the problems we have today is that the meat we eat, sorry farmers, we have that corn fed, and they have a very high ratio of omega-6 to omega-1, omega-2, omega-3 fatty acids. And that's an inflammatory type of fat. Anytime you get out of balance, I won't get into prostaglandins, but when you get those fatty acids out of balance like that, you get inflammation.
Okay, so a question then for you, because we're talking paleo and everything, is there a particular diet that is better for the anti-inflammatory?
Oh, yes.
Which is what?
You gotta wait.
But you only have 4 more minutes, Rex, on this.
Well, it's later on, and I didn't bring that with me, but basically what you're looking at a lot more vegetables, especially cruciferous vegetables, like we started eating kale. And kale's okay, it's just kind of, yeah. Spinach is good. Lots of the anti-inflammatory fruits like blueberries, raspberries, blackberries, anything that are black or red or blue have great antioxidants in them, very important for the anti-inflammatory diets.
Would you think like
Fairness.
the Mediterranean diet, is that?
Yes, in fact, that's what we're going to get to. All right, you guessed it. What we'll talk about in the future is the Mediterranean diet. It's a diet that's a well-balanced diet, doesn't have a lot of meat to it. The meat, a lot of times they have a lot of fish in it, but you don't have to have as much fish if you go either with game or grass-fed beef. Well, I'm sorry, Marita, that's the way it is. Because grass-fed beef or wild game has a balance of omega-6 omega-3s. It's 1 to 1 or 1 to 2. And that is very anti-inflammatory. And that you need tons of. And it'll be good for you.
It's not really good.
But if you go up to the Longhorn and you order that big, juicy ribeye,
But
that's not so good for you, but sure tastes good. That's what I said, it's kind of hard to stick with the diet sometimes. But these are lifestyle changes that you'll do well with. I'm going to run out of time.
I think we're gonna have to, I like your idea, and I'm thinking maybe we can use our wellness class where we can meet and do these extra topics. My one question is now, if we're not having any of these problems very much, what kind of vitamins or supplements should we be taking every day? Is there any ones that you definitely recommend everyone should take?
Yeah.
Tell me what they are.
Well, you need a multiple vitamin, but say multiple vitamins don't have enough. Depending on what you have on there and what you filled out, you may need a lot more folic acid than is available. Like it's 400 micrograms of folic acid. Some of them are up to 800, but you may need you may need 3, 4, 5 times that. You need magnesium, you need L-glutamine. Let me a second, let me have that. It's good too.
You have 30 seconds.
Well, let's just say fruits are good, vegetables are good, except don't eat a lot of corn, sorry.
Need a lot of corn.
Because corn is and corn oil, it's inflammatory. A lot of your vegetable oils are inflammatory. Soy is good unless you have a problem with the soy protein, and a lot of people do. But if you don't have it, then it's good. It's genistein, and it actually helps prevent cancer, and it's
I
good
thought it
stuff.
gave us cancer.
What's that?
I thought soy gave us cancer.
Not if you're not having a problem with it. It prevents a lot of things. But
Okay.
I didn't get to that, but there's, and I know I can't find it that quick, but I'll get to that next time, I promise. And I've really enjoyed talking with you today. And read the book, and I want good questions next time. I know Rita's got a lot of time, you can even buy the book. And then when you get through buying it and reading it, you can donate to the library so more people can have it. But you can't have mine because I'm not done with it.
Thank you, Rex, very much.